How you doing? How's things your end?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, enjoying the sunshine today. And
It's
yourself?
lovely. It's really lovely to have longer days. Always good to have longer days. And so, welcome to another episode of Sense and Insight. Today, we're going to be thinking about child-centered, child-led assessment and what that means in our settings. I'm going to start with you, Stephen, because that's the space that you work in every single day. What's your take on child-led assessment?
I suppose I do probably use the term child-centered assessment more, but I
Mm,
like the inclusion of thinking about child-led as well, because I think it all goes sort of hand in hand, really. But I suppose I sometimes start with what the opposite is when I'm talking to schools and nurseries about it. Sort of like I feel almost like the dark ages when I first started working in specialist education, what it was like. um, and how data focused everything was, and
mm,
how it was the norm really to work through a list of statements that we were looking for our children to achieve, and we wouldn't really move to the next stage until we'd marked everything off, or at least 80-90% of those things. And it just led to, whilst when I was a teacher first in specialist schools, it led to me planning my sessions really around what was next on the list for that child,
yeah,
which wasn't healthy, obviously, because it might not be what they needed to learn next or what they were interested in or engaging with.
yeah,
Um, because there was pressures realistically from subject leads saying, well, they've only made this much progress in, I don't know, literacy this term, so you need to find some more stuff to tick off that level to show whoever's going to come into school, usually an Ofsted inspector was the fear,
yeah,
that we're making really good progress. So it just led to a really bad cycle of looking at the list, spending lots of time sort of ticking things off the list, extracting those statements from the list into our planning, and then teaching towards them, even if that meant sometimes in sort of the worst case scenarios, like I remember milestones around sort of completing inset puzzles and stuff, 4-piece inset puzzles, and it would
yes,
realistically it would lead to hand over hand. Yeah, we're completing this puzzle, and I remember that happening in my early sort of teaching in special schools because I need to tick it off the
definitely.
list to move on in maths. And then we can look at a whole new set, a whole new list once we get onto the next level. So
Well,
yeah,
definitely.
not a
Yeah.
healthy place to be. Did you have any sort of recollection of that style of assessment, or was
Most definitely. And I think sometimes it hasn't fully moved on in the world of Zen. It hasn't fully moved on because one, people don't know exactly what they're assessing, first of all. Let's be honest. That's a big issue in the system, isn't there? And second of all, I think it's about trying again to shoehorn children into a system that's not really made for them. And it's about how do you find one assessments, because I take it slightly differently because I think assessment is the bedrock of education, isn't it? Where do our children start and where do we want to take them? And I think we do have to have some vision of that for all of our children, which is the missing piece for our SEN children, especially if they're distinctively SEN in our settings. And I think that's really important for people to start to get their heads around is what are we actually looking for. So yeah, we might want to assess a puzzle, but why and how, and do we know what it even takes to start a puzzle, getting deeper, the executive functioning, all the good stuff we know about. So I think, yeah, I still see it very much. I really have moments where I go in and a young person's still writing their name. And I'm like, ah, that is not
yeah?
an activity. That is not a learning activity for a lesson. That is something we do as we're going along, and we deepen learning in other ways. So yes, I think it's definitely still in the system.
And I think the reason it's still in the system because we're trying to a lot of places. And this week alone, I was thinking before we jumped on the call, I've spoken to a school yesterday and two this morning who were asking me how I can get more data and analysis out of the framework that they're using because
Yeah.
yesterday was the governors want to see data.
Yeah.
And this morning were both leadership teams, head teachers, sort of, they just really want to see the data and
Yeah.
to show the progress. And I'm saying that doesn't have to be the way. So, and all of those three conversations, I sort of started quite abruptly, really, by saying it's really wrong that that is the starting point for your assessment processes. to satisfy the needs of these adults, sort of obviously important adults in the scheme of things. But if we're shaping our whole pedagogy and our methods around assessment on the needs of those people, then that's not child-centered at all. That's head teacher-centered and governor-centered assessment systems. And I've been in governor meetings at like 9 o'clock on a Wednesday evening where you've got like 10 minutes and you're trying to convince them that everything's going well in your subject. And everyone wants that to go quickly. Everyone wants something really easy to absorb, yet 100% of the children are making expected progress of over 50%. Perfect, well done. And so you sort of understand where these systems have come from, and a bit like that with the Ofsted team, like coming in. And I've been like assessment lead on an inspection, maybe probably 10 or 11 years ago, before they sort of the Rochford Review and the reforms. And it was very much me at my computer saying, look at this data and look how great this is. And, oh, yeah, you're outstanding. Well done. And then I had another one maybe 4 or 5 years later where we didn't look at data at all. And they still said, yeah, you're outstanding. But it was a completely different route to that outstanding. It was a much more child-centered and a much more beneficial to everyone route, really, where we actually had we had an ability to communicate what progress was like through telling stories and being able to verbalize it, really, as opposed to pointing at numbers and graphs and charts. And it fed our assessment, then fed into high quality provision and teaching and learning, which when you said assessment is the bedrock, I completely agree. And I think assessment doesn't actually need to be sitting down and marking anything. Assessment is happening all the time. We're assessing as teachers, we're observing and assessing all the time. Like, can they do that? Oh, maybe I'll just try this. It doesn't have to be a formal thing. And it works really well if we've got educators who can do that responsively throughout the day. And then obviously you also need to sit down with someone at some point and explain what this looks like. But it doesn't necessarily need to be through graphs and charts. Hopefully it's through a really deep knowledge of the children you're working with.
Definitely. And I think that's about redefining what assessment means, isn't it? Especially with distinct learners and learners with additional needs, is what does the data need to look like for these young people? What are we wanting to see? And I have that conversation a number of times in the schools that I go in, because obviously they want to be able to present what's happening. And there's lots of different routes, as you rightly said. Knowing the children is the most important thing. If you can talk the journey, if you can understand how the children have got from A to B and what that's looking right now, is great. Is that how do you present that? You know, I remember back in the day when I started the resource bases, I used to keep case studies on the young people, where they started, what we've put in place, what the outcomes look like, why we think this is going to work going forward. And that was the bedrock of our assessment at the beginning, because they were academically strong. They just had other areas that they needed support in. And so it's about understanding, how do you want to present the data? Because data is there to tell a story, but it should be. We know it can be shaped in many ways, but it's there to tell a story. And it's about what do we want to define data as for our children who learn differently. And I think that's the big question in the system as well at the moment, and how we're going to really be able to present that to visitors, because unfortunately that is the one thing that's in people's minds, isn't it, is how we present this to a visitor coming in. I think from some of the lessons I'm having at the moment, from some of the meetings I've been in and Ofsted meetings that I've been in terms of that, there isn't a lean back towards data, because there was a lean away from data. But I think in terms of the inclusion element, there's a very much of a focus on have you adapted and what's the intent behind the adaptation. And I think that's where the story is at the moment. But I think the deeper that story gets, the more people are going to say, so how do you know that? And can you prove that? And what was the starting point? And I think real pictures, a real picture of the starting point, a pen picture, a portrait of what's going on is really, really key for all of our children who don't fit the neat boxes of a linear learning, if there's any such a thing.
Yeah, and that's the word that you've used there, linear, is so key to this discussion, really, because data really relies on linear progress. Data can't really effectively tell a story of lateral learning or generalization of skills. So that's where the communicative aspect of being an educator and being able to discuss and tell the story of a child's learning is really important. And just as importantly, we can tell the story of the child's learning, but can we tell the story of how we've enabled that learning? What have we done since September? So we've adapted this and we've tweaked that and we've adjusted this and we've introduced these new resources. And these are the things that I've done to enable that child to progress on their journey. For me, like, the data can be about the quality of the teaching and learning. I think that is something that it's almost like flipping the narrative a bit and saying, if we focus all our attention on the quality of our teaching and learning, then the children are bound to make progress as long as the quality and standard is high of the environment and the provision. Then the children, if they're engaged, they're going to make really good progress. So we need to be constantly sort of assessing the quality of our own teaching and learning, not just sort of learning walks and observations from leadership teams, although that's not to say that they can't fit into that system if they're done in an appropriate way. But I think it's that constant self-reflection of how engaged are these children in all of these different curriculum areas. And that's what I discuss with most of my Teckington schools I work with, that why don't we start monitoring where we have concerns about our provision? Okay, so Stephen is doing really well with his CLL, say he's doing great with his maths, but in terms of his physical development, he doesn't seem to be very engaged with our sessions. He doesn't seem to be that interested in exploring his gross motor skills outside or whatever it might be, and we need to do something different. So we would mark that as a concern about our provision for Stephen's physical development. We need to do something differently. And then from there, we've identified, which is, for me, when we're meeting these visitors coming into our schools, if we can, they're very interested in processes. Like, how do you identify when things aren't going so well, and what do you do about it? And for me, that's where I sort of point schools towards and leadership teams. Like, if we can monitor that data. So in September, we identified across our 50 children, 35 concerns across all the different curriculum areas, and subject leads have analysed this and grouped it and looked for patterns in that data. And by Christmas, we've managed to get that to under 25. So we've made a big decrease in the amount of concerns about our provision and the quality of it. And while that's happening, the whole time, the quality of teaching and learning is rising, because it naturally is going to happen because we are adapting and becoming more inclusive for the children that we're working with. All pinned on the engagement word, really. Like, how interested and engaged are they with what you're providing, whether that's sort of pre-formal play-based learning, or even if it's more formal, sitting at desk and a child's ready for, are they actually engaged with what we're doing? Is it a learning experience for them?
I love that, definitely. And I think what I hear in that is, one, the word forensic. I love that word. I'm always like, how forensic are you? Like, let's get underneath this. So forensic and efficiency, that's what I'm hearing from what you're sharing, is that the more we dig deep into the things that are a challenge generally, getting that general picture, and the more we're willing to adapt around that, is actually where we get more efficient in the way that we do what we do. Because what I find is that when I'm out and about and people are still trying to shoehorn our children in, is that actually the efficiency is lost at that very point, because we're putting energy into something that's not going to work now or in the foreseeable future, because we've missed a link somewhere in the journey of learning for that young person. And the more that we can go back and be confident with the things that you've just shared, really highlighting what's happening in our system, what's going on in our school, what do we need to move X, Y, and Z, the more confident we are with that, the more efficient we become with the energy that we have, the resources that we have, and the focus on what learning looks like for those that stand out differently to others. And I think that that's very, very powerful.
I think when educators are trusted as well, that their judgment is good enough, they know these children really well, and I think it does feel a healthier sort of environment to be working in, when you're not trying to prove yourself through numbers or stats, and trust that we can have a really genuine conversation where we're both trying to improve the outcomes for that child, and not the data outcomes, the actual day-to-day engagement and progress outcomes. So,
before we finish, because I know we're about to, do you think that the system would ever get to that point where individuals are trusted to make the difference?
It definitely happens, in my opinion, in the best
It does
schools that I
happen.
work with already.
It happen.
And that's a journey that we were determined to get on. Obviously, there needs to be a level of moderation of what quality
Yeah.
judgment looks like. So you can't just blindly trust a teacher in your school to say, yeah, everything's absolutely fine, everyone's making amazing progress, all
Yeah.
good. You've got to dig into that. You've got to dig into the concerns about provision, but you've also got to sort of fairly randomly dig into the good stories as well, whether that's looking at online journals and seeing examples through the year and saying, well, that doesn't quite add up.
Yes.
I've been told that they're making great progress, but I can't see any difference from September to March or whatever. So, so I would always advocate that this sort of like a period, maybe at the end of each half term, where the teachers identify where they're worried about their provision, and then a follow-up chat. Usually, I'd sit down with that teacher then first week after half term and say, okay, let's dig deeper into this. Just a half-hour chat, but you've said these are your concerns. Maybe I could give you some help with ideas for how we could sort of improve or make your provision more engaging. But also, I'd sometimes say, you've said that little Tommy's flying with his maths, but I haven't really been able to see that from his sort of the examples you've uploaded to Tapestry or whatever. Could you tell us a bit more about it, and just so I understand better, and then maybe I could point you in a direction that maybe of things that you could try and capture to share with the family to show that in the next few weeks, you know?
Yeah.
I think there is a way of getting to that place, I think, and it's just a healthier use of time for everyone. If you're thinking, instead of sitting on a computer after school ticking boxes, you can sort of be thinking about improving the quality of provision the next day.
Most definitely. I agree with that. Definitely. It's an interesting space, isn't it? Because I think assessment is always one of those spaces, even in linear learners, that it's still something that needs to be sharpened up in terms of really understanding what children are sharing, past scaffolds, past all the other things. What is the intrinsic understanding of each child in our settings, regardless if there's a need or anything? And do our assessment processes allow that to be really effectively there? So I think there is definitely, and that moderation piece, being really clear on the moderation, is a really key.
Yeah, I think just asking yourself, who's it for? Like, if you're in school where your whole assessment system, like going back to the beginning, is based on the needs of the governors in your school, then that's really bad, to be honest. But it's happening, like you're saying, it's happening. And people are still doing what I was doing 20 years ago with the tick lists and the planning, and it's still happening in a lot of places.
And I think some places, and I know we've, again, time, but I know some places have managed to do a mixture of both. So maybe there's a space for both.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I work with a lot of schools, they still use B squared, but they also understand how to look for the other things that we're discussing, and they still see how they can move that on. And sometimes they're structured, So it's about the balance and the type of curriculum you create as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd say so. And to finish off, we're going to be presenting together, aren't we, at the Nursery World Big Day Out in May. So, and this is the topic we're going to be talking about, isn't it, that day?
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
Yeah, if anyone's coming to that event in London in May, we'll see you there.
Definitely. Great conversation again.
Yeah, see you, Emma. Bye.
Take care.